is uncharacteristically quiet. All right, so we got a group at the door headed this way. We'll wait just a second, and I will pull up the announcements for today. Hey, we are so glad that you are here tonight. If you are our guest or first time here, we're going to be in the book of Ruth in just a little bit. So go ahead and start turning over that way. But before we begin, we're going to do some praying, and got a couple of announcements to make. There they are. Our prayer requests that I've got on our list tonight. Number one, they're always asking for continued prayers for Ruth Johnson. That's Danita Snyder's mom. And she is over at Edgewater and would love visits. And if you go to visit Miss Ruth, be ready to, she'll chat you up. All right, but she is awesome to talk to. Also, Elizabeth Brackett, still over at Bedrock. That's the name of it, right? Bedrock. I got the chance to go see her, it was Monday or Tuesday, and meet her friend Herschel, who loves Eva. She loves to have visitors as well. And D.C. Taylor is having heart issues and kidney issues, but he did have a procedure done today to get him out of AFib, and so that was successful. They're going to let him recover for a little bit, and then they're going to look to put a defibrillator in. They have ruled out a pacemaker, but they're going to get that done soon. So hopefully, DC is going to get back on this path of good health. But just be in prayer for DC and Deb. And I asked Deb if they need anything at all. And if you know Deb, you probably know her answer. Cards and prayers are the best thing. She's the kind that she makes her own cards and send those out. So if you get a chance to send a card over, just let them know that you're praying for them. That would be good. I would not recommend just popping in to visit with them. It's probably something better to call and schedule if you get a chance to do that. But a card would suffice in a great way. Also, David Davidson is back in Waterman right now. He should be in a room now. I went up there a little bit earlier today, and that place is so busy. Every hallway is lined with beds in the ER. Every room full, and then I walked by 4 hallways that were just lined up bed to bed. It's just absolutely crazy over there. But he, you remember that he had kidney stones. They put a stent in to help with that, and that's infected. And so they're gonna get that under control, and hopefully he can go back home as well. Are there any other prayer requests that we need to put on our list for tonight? All right. A lot of sickness going around. It's good to see the Wisers back. Allison and Michael are here. They're here Sunday, but man, sickness has been going around. We've had it in our family. I know pretty much everyone's got it going on. I can't wait for school to stop so they can stop going to that cesspool of germs and just come to this cesspool of germs. That will be awesome. Hey, can we do this? I'm going to add our teachers to our prayer request. It is the last 2 weeks of school. That's all I'm going to say. It's fun. When are grades due? Are they already done? Oh, sorry. No. Don't send your kids to school anymore. They are done. Give our teachers a break. But no, I know that's just a fun time of the year. All right, so as far as announcements go, there are a couple things going on. May 20th, which is this coming up Saturday, there is the CFBC Spring Fling and Corn Roast. And if that corn looks anything like I've seen online, I'm going to have to reserve multiple ears of corn. But that test that y'all did looks pretty incredible. So that corn roast is on the 20th. It's from 3 to 6. And there is a little flyer about it out on the bulletin board for that. Also be aware that this coming Sunday, May 21st, is our high school senior celebration. And years past, we've had like 16 seniors or 12 seniors that. This year, we get to give all of our love and all of our attention to one. All right? And that is Miss Claudia, who is going to be, Claudia Velasquez, who is going to be graduating, and she's headed to Faulkner University. And so this Sunday, if you feel like it is something you can do or want to do, there's going to be a time to celebrate Claudia. And then also this Sunday as well, for elders, deacons, ministry leaders, there is a meeting at 3 o'clock in the fellowship hall. All right, well, let's do some praying for a moment, and then we're going to cover just one more chapter in the book of Ruth, and then before you know it, it'll be time to go back home and to get out of these walls and to go glorify God in our homes and in our communities and where we work. So that's why we're here, to kind of recharge. So let's pray together. Our Father in heaven, we love you so much. And we're just really, really, really glad that we're your children. And I can't even imagine, God, a life that could be lived without knowing you, without hope, without real, true love, without a church family, without salvation. That is a life that just seems absolutely miserable. But God, I'm glad that you've been patient with us and that you continue to do that. So God, every day, may it always be our aim to glorify you. God, if we do anything that is good, we want that to cry out your name, not ours. So God, I pray that you help us here at Orange Avenue. Help us to experience the unity that you desire. Help us to just see open doors for the gospel. And not only to see them, God, but to act on those, to open those doors. Help us to be people who are just scattering the seed of the gospel all over this city. And we dream of a day, God, where there's not a single ear that lives here in Eustis that hasn't heard the gospel and had the chance to obey. And we know, God, that no matter what we can dream up or think of or plan, that you can do immeasurably more than anything that we ask or anything that we can imagine. Because you, God, are the most powerful. You are always in control. You are the one that changes hearts. And you are the one that gives us the strength to move on to the next day and the breath to wake up. So God, as we think about Eustis knowing the gospel, I know you will do even more incredible things than that. But God, we want to follow you. We want to give our whole lives to you. I'm just thankful for all the different classes that are going on tonight. The discipleship class, the youth class, the singing class. God, I'm thankful for even the cradle roll that's going on right now with our little babies. I'm thankful to be a part of a church that teaches your word from the cradle all the way up to being an adult. God, I'm mindful tonight of those that we've been talking about, praying for. I'm thinking of David Davidson. I'm thinking of Elizabeth and Ruth. And God, with DC and Deb. And I just pray, God, in all those situations that you just be so evidently present with them. God, that the comfort they experience is so great, that the healing they experience is so thorough, and that the love that they feel from their church family is so awesome, that the only answer is that it came from you. And again, may you be glorified, even in the midst of all these struggles. God, as we open your word tonight, we just want to surrender to it. I'm thankful, God, that you didn't leave us alone, but you left us with the Bible. You gave it to us, and may we follow it, and may we love it, may we crave it. God, may it be what directs our life. We thank you for your Holy Spirit. We ask those same things from your Spirit, God. May your Spirit be the compass, that North Star of our lives. But God, we ask all these things in full faith in the name of Jesus. Amen. All right. Ruth chapter 3. All right, so we left off last week because whoever was teaching didn't go fast enough. Eddie, was that you? No, I guess it must have been me that last week. But we ended our study on kind of a cliffhanger of questions. And I want to start tonight again with those questions. I told you that we would do that just to get us talking a little bit and seeing what we can think about these things. But I want to remind you of what's been going on in the book of Ruth. First of all, we know that Ruth has been happening in the time of the Judges. All right, so everything that we read about or we've read about as we studied Judges, some scholars put the book of Ruth right around Judges chapter 10. I don't really know for sure that that's the case, but it is happening in the time of the Judges. Somebody remind me real quick, or remind us all, the last verse of the book of Judges. What is the overall theme of what's going on in the time of the Judges? That's right. That last verse that we read, it says, "And there was no king in Israel," and like Miss Joy said, "and everyone did what was right in their own eyes." Now, recipe for awesome civilization, right? Everybody just does whatever they think is right. Here's the cool thing. What I think is right is always the same as what Mick thinks is right. Isn't that correct? Yeah. Or what I think is right is always the same as the guy that lives down the road here thinks is right. Or you think of anybody. We can get like 10 people in the room, and there are some situations that we will never agree on. So if everyone's doing what is right in their own eyes, what does that equal out to? What's going to happen ultimately? Chaos, confusion, all those things. Just imagine, let me see if I can put this in a more modern term. Imagine what we experience on a daily basis in our culture, all right, where people do what is right, and we can't even, I say we can't, our culture can't even figure out basic creation things like your gender or your, what you are or who you are. This is the result of everyone doing and whatever is right in their own eyes, or I have my truth, you have your truth. It's absolutely ridiculous. There's a truth. There's a truth. And we can realize and know the truth by reading God's Word. If you want to look at creation, look at when He created. And He created them male and female. Right? And there were differences in those male and female. And that's just how He created. And so there is a truth that is out there. So in the time of the Judges, what we got is that everyone's doing whatever they want just because they think it's right. The book of Ruth takes place in a couple of different places. First of all, it starts in Bethlehem. Naomi is married to a man named, do you remember his name? Elimelech. Elimelech means God is king, right? Even though there is no king in the land, Elimelech means God is king. They start off in Bethlehem, but there happens to be a big issue going on in Bethlehem. What was that issue that was happening? A famine, no food, and so they take off. They take off to a kind of an odd place to take off to, and it is to the place called Moab. And as they get to Moab, you have Elimelech, Naomi, and their two sons, and their two sons find love in the arms of two Moabite women. One's name is Orpah, and the other's name is the namesake of our book that we're studying, Ruth. And then in 10 years' time, where you have Elimelech, Naomi, and their family in Moab, they spent 10 years there waiting for famine to stop. Great tragedy befalls their family. All right, so first, Elimelech passes away. And you have Naomi now as a widow, but she at least has her two sons and daughters-in-law. And then tragedy strikes again, and her two sons pass away. And so now you have an Israelite woman from Bethlehem who has two, I guess pagan is the right word here, pagan Moabite daughters-in-law. And what does she tell them to do? Yeah, go back to your land. She said, I can't offer you anything. In fact, even if I were to have a baby today, you'd have to wait for years until they were of age to marry. I can't offer you anything. So go back to your families. to your mother's households, and you find husbands. And at first, they both say, no, we're good. She insists. Orpah takes off, but then Ruth, I use this term, she basically pledges allegiance to Ruth and makes one of the most loyal, incredible oaths to her mother-in-law. You remember some of the words there. She says, don't urge me to leave you or to return from following you. Wherever you go, I'll go. And wherever you stay or wherever you dwell, that's where I'm going to stay and that's where I'm going to dwell. And then she says, your people are going to be my people. And your God is going to be my God. That's not just relocation. That is total life change. That is stepping away from all previous religious beliefs. That is stepping away from allegiance to your nationality. That is all those things. That's a big deal. She is loyal. She is an awesome daughter-in-law, and she just stays loyal. So they hear that famine has been lifted, or God has started to provide, so they go back to Bethlehem. And I'm going to make this much quicker than what we're doing here. Go back to Bethlehem, but they're rich, and they have everything they could ever want, right? No, they have nothing. And so Ruth finds herself gleaning in the fields of a man named Boaz. All right? Gleaning in the fields of a man named Boaz, and Boaz just happens to be a redeemer for their family. We talked a little bit about what that means, and we'll talk a little bit more about it tonight. But we saw last week that Boaz, or Ruth, finds favor in the eyes of Boaz. So she started just gleaning with the other women, but then he demands that the young men leave her alone. But then he brings her into his table. They eat bread together. He sends some home with her, and then he tells his men, the reapers is what they're called, those who are coming behind the harvest and reaping everything, that hey, guess what? Not only is she going to be with these other young ladies, we're going to elevate her status where she can glean among the sheaves as well, and so she is now going to be provided for food. I think the word we used last week was security. She went from having nothing to now having security in a great way. All right, so the one thing we talked about was that gleaning thing that was going on. You remember we went back into early in the Old Testament to talk about that gleaning. Someone remind us real quick, what was that process of gleaning? Why did God put that in place at first? What was gleaning? Yeah. That's right. So it was from way back in Deuteronomy, we read about that. And so what Donna's saying is completely right. They were commanded with their fields and crops that they would not touch or harvest from the outside, from the perimeter. And that would have been for the sojourners, those traveling. They would have been able to reach in and to take from that harvest that was there. But also, as they were harvesting or reaping, if anything fell from that harvest time, they were to leave it behind. And there was a group usually of destitute, whether it be widows or poor women, they would go behind the reaper and they would collect the fallen heads of grain or barley that were there. Or in the vineyards, they would do the same thing. And it was just a custom. So if you had a field, like Boaz had a field, you would know that a portion of that was not really yours. A portion of that was to take care of those who were poor, those Israelites who were poor. All right, so the question that we had at the end, we didn't really get to talk about, was this. God made cultural provisions for the poor Israelites. He made sure that those who could not feed themselves were going to have food. All right, now this is not a political question, so please don't translate it that way. All right. How should this, or how do we see this translated in our culture, in our society today? Now, I'm not talking about government programming. Okay, that's not what I'm putting out there. What I'm really wanting to think about is this. For us as Christians, what does this look like today? Or do we have anything that is like this where we have the fruits of our labor, but a portion of it is helping those who cannot necessarily help themselves? Okay, so we have ministries here that do some of that, right? Like the Bread of Life type ministry, and that's a great thing. I always love. Here's one thing I love about Bread of Life is this: that everything, all the food that is given away, is donated by members of the church. And not that a food bank is a bad thing or anything like that, but I love that what we get to give away is people deliver it all month long. And sometimes at the very end of the month, when it's time to do Bread of Life, our pantry event, there are people who just come through and just, hey, what's left? What's needed to be bought? And they just bring it. And so yeah, there's a ministry that has to do with some of that stuff, but it surely can't stop right there.
It's an individual thing.
Well,
If we're taught to love and care for others, and so take their burden in some way. I think I'll get political a bit. A lot of these political programs just took that burden away from people that should be doing it on their own.
yeah.
But now he makes it easy for them to say, well, the government's doing it. So, I think it's an individual thing. Everybody's got more than they need,
Yeah.
and to share that with those that haven't or have needs.
Yeah. And it is individual. Now, but it's also church collective. I mean, yeah, I mean, like, not just with a ministry like this, but, Drew does our benevolent stuff and does a great job with that and helping out. And Bob does our mission stuff, and incredible that you think about the power of when God's people can come together out of the blessings that God has given in our lives and pool resources. What can be done with that, right? That's an awesome type of thing that we are blessed to be able to do.
To go along with that, Teresa and I, we've been sponsoring a girl in Haiti since she was in kindergarten, and she's getting ready to go to high school. So,
Awesome.
Never met the girl, but get pictures of her.
Yeah.
It's just something we just felt obligated to do
Yep.
for that country.
Yeah, that's awesome. We get to make those choices. And I know it's just a little bit different language than what we get with what God was doing with the gleaning. But the idea was that like Boaz, he owned a field, but did he really own the field? It's God's, right? He was blessed with it, but that belonged to God. And so what needed to be done got done because that belonged to God. Now, could he have fought against that? That's not in Boaz's character. He absolutely could have. But he was doing what he did because that field was God's field. And we talk about that a lot with things like our money and our resources, stuff like that, just being stewards of what God has given us. And that's such an incredible truth. But this is just another reminder, further back in the Old Testament, that God desires us with the blessings that we have to provide for those who cannot provide for themselves. And it happens in so many different ways. It's not just in food, but I've seen so many times people here take others to eat, where it may not appear like they're going to eat, or hey, are you going to eat somewhere this Sunday? No, I just can't. Well, yes, you are now. You're coming with me, or come to my home, opening your home, or opening your dinner table. It's an incredible thing, but it's just another way that stuff like this, these provisions for those who cannot yet provide for themselves, get to do that. But there's a good news for those who couldn't provide, is that there was the year of Jubilee that was always around. Right? Now, some of those people who couldn't provide were that way because they chose to willingly sell themselves or what they had and to walk into servanthood to somebody else. And so, they would be now in service, but they would have no more possession. And then they could be redeemed at some point. So it could be either by the year of Jubilee, where they could be redeemed, or they could get somehow gain enough wealth or work enough where they could purchase everything back and they could be redeemed. Or what we've been talking about with Boaz, there could be a family member who could then in turn redeem. If they had the wealth to do that, they could buy back all the property that was sold, they could buy back the person that was sold, and they could redeem that person, and that was called the kinsman redeemer, or just simply the redeemer. All right, so we're going to talk about that here in chapter 3. There was only one other question, and we can talk about it, but we saw that Ruth behaved in an honorable way with Naomi, and Boaz took note of it and blessed her greatly. How does honorable behavior provide positive outcomes today? Now, I know the obvious. It doesn't always, does it? There are times where you will act in an honorable way, and there might be nothing but negative outcomes that come about it. Doing the right thing doesn't always demand a positive outcome. But how could you, as a follower of Christ, think about your work situation or home situation, if you chose to do the honorable thing like Ruth did, how could that possibly have positive results? I'll throw one out there. All right, I'll lob one up. I think the workplace is one of the easy places to think about this. I've told this illustration before, and I'll make it quick, but my second job was at the fine establishment of PetSmart. All right, cashier like none other has ever been, and I remember the manager. I'll never forget his name, Steven Sorensen. He played football with Lonnie Johnson at FSU. But I went for the interview, and I dressed nice because my dad told me I had to. I felt weird walking into PetSmart in a tie, but I did it. And one of the questions that Steven asked me was this. He said, if somebody were to leave their change accidentally behind at the register, what would you do? And I'm like, well, obviously I would do the right thing. I would hold it aside, or I'd give it to you, and if they came back, then you give it to them, right? And you get to hold it aside, and they'll obviously realize that they didn't get their money back, and they'll come, and it'll be waiting for them. And he turned to me and he said, when can you be drug tested? The job is yours. And I was like, what are you talking about? Like, that's it? One question. And he said, everybody that I asked said I would keep it. And people do that. But if now here's the thing, Miss Alice, if you're at a job interview, don't say that. No, that would be lying, and I'm glad they were honest and they didn't get the chance to do that. But it's just a really small thing, that if you're honorable and if you work hard, Colossians 3 says, in all that you do it as if you're doing it for the Lord. If that's how you work, if that's how you father or mother or teach or whatever it might be, does that demand that it will always be easy? No, but it will be blessed. It'll be blessed. I've seen teenager after teenager get promoted and promoted and promoted in their jobs because they are honorable and they do the right thing. I mean, people who own their own businesses stand apart if they are just kind, compassionate, and loving. And that's a big deal. And so just like just like Ruth, the way that you conduct yourself day to day, honorable before the Lord, can have incredible outcomes in your life in a big way. Tony, I see you standing. Are you getting ready to say something? All right, just spin. He just had to spin around real quick. Sorry, usually if you stand, you want to give something there. All right, so let's move into Ruth chapter 3. In Ruth chapter 3, we're going to break this into 3 small sections, but let's read the first 5 verses together. It says, Then Naomi, her mother-in-law, said to her, My daughter, should I not seek rest for you, that it may be well with you? Is not Boaz our relative, with whose young women you were? See, he is winnowing barley tonight at the threshing floor. Wash, therefore, and anoint yourself, and put on your cloak, and go down to the threshing floor. But do not make yourself known to the man until he has finished eating and drinking. But when he lies down, observe the place where he lies, and then go and uncover his feet and lie down, and he will tell you what to do. And she replied, All that you say, I will do. All right. This verse has been the source, these verses have been the source of a lot of discussion. All right? And we'll get to those last verse 4 and 5 here in just a second. But I want to point out a couple of things about the first two verses here. First of all is that Naomi is looking for a way to bless Ruth in the same way that Ruth blessed her. All right? At this point, what can Naomi offer Ruth? Nothing. She can't offer anything. But she realizes that Naomi needs, or that Ruth needs something. I know I keep mixing up Naomi and Ruth. I'm confusing myself. But Naomi realizes that Ruth needs something, and that something is rest. It's rest, because what has she been doing since they got into Bethlehem? Working in the field. And at least that first time that she was working in the field, we know that she was working from morning to night. That she was gleaning behind the reapers from morning till night, working hard. And so Naomi says, hey, should I not seek rest for you? Because I want things to be well with you as well. All right? An incredible thing. Naomi's heart is to go back and help. And then she realizes we don't call her a schemer by any means, but she's got a plan, right? And what's her plan? Ruth needs to marry Boaz. I mean, it's quite possibly that will be the only path that Ruth can ultimately have rest, is if she gets married. All right, now the plan's a little bit different. All right, now depending on what you read and what you teach, the truth is that in the Hebrew, the wording that is used has pretty heavy sexual overtones. All right. Now, but within the context of what we're talking about and the context of what happens after this, I personally do not believe that there is anything inappropriate or sexual going on in this situation. All right, you read commentaries and it talks about this where Naomi says, "Hey, go uncover his feet." Is that could quite possibly be euphemistic for other parts of his body that would typically be used in more covenant type things and Hebrew type stuff, but with what we're going to look at is their response. All right, it's taught in so many different ways. I personally do not believe. I believe that the wording kind of is the same. Like the uncover in the Hebrew would have had a little bit risque undertones there. The uncover, the lie down. Those things would be things that people would say, whoa, what's up with that? All right, but if we look at what's actually getting ready to happen, I don't believe that to be the case here. And you can disagree with me if you want. That's really okay. It doesn't make... It's not the part of the story that we're needing to talk about here at least. All right? But here's the thing, is that Naomi urges Ruth to move forward from mourning and to make herself available to Boaz. Now, this is something I miss at first, and I don't know if it's absolutely true, but what does Naomi tell Ruth to go do? Not just to go lay at his feet, uncover his feet, and lay there in that way, but she says to clean yourself up, right? Go wash yourself and anoint yourself and put on your cloak, and then go do this. This language that you read there, that Naomi is telling Ruth, I'm sorry, I keep wandering up here, that Naomi keeps telling Ruth is very much the same as what you saw David do, or what you'll see David do after the death of his son. All right, you remember he mourned for a week after as his son was dying. When his son finally died, that son with Bathsheba, what did he do? He got up, he washed himself, he anointed himself, and then he moved forward. So the language that is actually being used here is not just, hey, clean yourself up so you're more presentable, but it is quite possibly get yourself out of mourning and let's start the process of moving forward. Now, I don't know how long it's been, but she's still quite possibly, they're both still in mourning for the great loss and tragedy that they've been in. And what Naomi is telling her is, look, we have an opportunity to move forward from the loss that you've experienced. I know you've lost your husband. It's my son. But why don't you wash yourself, anoint yourself, and then go present yourself, because it's time to move forward. So it's not just hygiene, hey, you stink. If you're going to impress this man, clean yourself up. Now, it's probably true. That would help. But this is more mourning language and getting out of that we see there. All right, so any comments, questions about those first 5 verses other than the uncover his feet and lie down with him? I'm just kidding. Miss Alice?
I grew up without water around a lot of times.
Yeah.
People didn't take a bath every day.
Yeah.
Once a week or something like that. So it just sounds like they're just in a different kind of setting.
Oh, absolutely. There's, yeah, and they don't have all the luxuries like we have today, and certainly, so the contexts are different as well, culturally within this.
Also, there, Naomi may have been giving Ruth permission.
Yeah.
As the older woman saying, it's okay.
Yeah. No, yeah.
Okay that you do that. And it seems that these customs, however they play out in the finer points, were Hebrew. And Ruth wasn't Hebrew.
Mm-hmm.
So in a sense, Naomi's saying, here's how we do this here.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's a piece of it.
Yeah, and there's not a lot said about this custom. There's not a lot that we know about it. But what it seems to be is that what she is telling Ruth to go and do is a Hebrew custom for kind of presenting availability for marriage and that kind of thing. But yeah, you're right. This would have been, what Naomi is doing is giving Ruth permission to move forward. Because why is Ruth so loyal to Naomi? Because of that family connection, because that's her mother-in-law. And so imagine for a lady like Ruth, you know her good character. Well, if I go marry, then what's that mean? You know, if I were to take like Orpah may have gone home and got married, but she may have a different mother-in-law now. And she is so loyal to Ruth or to Naomi that she needs that permission to move forward, and she gets it.
It's kind of neutral.
Yeah.
Naomi says it's okay, and Ruth says it's okay for both of us because she follows through.
Right. So here's the cool thing. Like, you're going to see this situation benefit everybody, right? Because up to this point, what do we know about Boaz? Well, we know he's got a field.
Honorable man, but also a family, distant family.
Yep. So he's distant family to Elimelech. And if he's a redeemer, what does that say about his marital status? He's single, right? Now, I don't know if he had been married before or lost a wife, whatever it is, but at the time that we're reading this, he is a single man. And I will just put this out there. We get context of this. A single man looking for a companion, right? And so we're going to see a really cool response in this interaction between Ruth and Boaz is that we picture this of being, man, Boaz is providing all this stuff for Ruth, but Ruth, just being the awesome woman that she is an incredible blessing to Boaz as well, just like she was to Naomi. So let's read those next verses. We're going to do 6 through 13 together. Sorry. That was my phone. All right. It says, so she went down, she obeyed, she went down to the threshing floor and did just as her mother-in-law had commanded her. And when Boaz had eaten and drunk, now stop, he was not drunk. There's no indication that Boaz got totally carried away at this. There was not even a party, but he was not drunk. He ate and drank, and his heart became merry. Now, a lot of times we put in our minds, oh man, he must have been a little bit, woohoo. Think about this. You ever been hangry? Yeah, me too, like at least once a day. And what happens after you eat? You're merry again. You're happy again. So all this indicates is not that he had indulged and he was drunk or anything like that, but what it does indicate is that he drank, he ate, and he was happy. Hans? Right. That's all it is. It's just past tense. It doesn't say he was drunk, it just said he drunk. And that's a weird southern term, at least in Umatilla, where they say he drunk. And you don't have to say, I'm just kidding. I'll move on.
These interpretations where people try to make the words so much more than they are
Yeah.
are a good example of how we Americanize the text,
Yeah.
because that's what it would be in American.
Yeah. Here's what we know about Boaz. He had a hard day's work. He enjoyed a good meal. And then just like you do, after a good day's work, and then you eat a good meal, and you're just ready to go to sleep. Right? That's a good feeling, isn't it? And your heart's merry after that. You've worked hard, then you enjoyed some of the fruits of your work, and then it's just time to close your eyes and to thank God for the blessings that you've had. And that's kind of what's going on here with Boaz. So after he'd eaten and drunk and his heart was merry, he went to lie down at the end of the heap of grain. And then she came softly and uncovered his feet, and she lay down. At midnight, the man was startled, obviously. There's now a woman at his feet that was not there when he went to sleep. Some commentators say he was probably startled because with his feet uncovered, it would have been cold, so he would have woken up because he got cold. I don't know why he got startled, but he does ask a really funny question. As it says, at midnight, the man was startled, turned over, and behold, a woman lay at his feet. And he said, "Who are you?" Now, I don't know how he asked that question, but you can imagine different ways that could come out. Like, who are you? Or, who are you? There are just so many different little inflections and ways. Like, is he angry? Is he just surprised? Is he, who are you? A little bit interested in what's going on here? I don't know. But Boaz asked this obvious question, who are you? And she says, I am Ruth, your servant. Now, earlier in the book of Ruth, Ruth was called a servant. Now, one thing that's pretty interesting is that in the Hebrew, the word servant used at the beginning of Ruth versus the one that is here were two different words for servant. This one denotes a little bit more of a relationship, or I know you, but I'm still your servant, but I know you. And it's just maybe just indicative of that progression of him including into his table, taking care of her, and now she finds himself at her feet, or at his feet. Right, and she is indebted to him. He has taken care of her and Naomi in a great way, and has provided for her greatly. But the words are a little bit different that are there. But then she says, spread your wings over your servant, for you are a redeemer. All right? So we now know this, that Boaz has wings. Just kidding. A lot of you in your Bibles have little footnotes there. And if you look down, what does it say about, or your garment, right? Or the corner of your garment, put those, cover me in that. So this is apparently a part of that Hebrew custom that to indicate the acceptance of at least the pursuit of marriage. So what we're seeing here is that Ruth has taken that step forward to Boaz. She has uncovered his feet, and she has laid there at his feet. And so for him to reciprocate or to accept kind of that, okay, we're going to pursue this now, he is to cover her with the edge of his garment. All right? Things would be so much easier if we still stuck to this instead of these fancy rings people throw around, but I guess we won't go back to the Hebrew custom. There's a really cool word in here as well also. That word wings, if you look back, she says, hey, spread your wings over your servant, for you are a redeemer. Though that word wings, if you look back in chapter 2 and verse 12, here's what that says. It says, the Lord repay you for what you have done. This is Boaz talking to Ruth. And a full reward be given to you by the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you take refuge. All right? Or you get your protection. And so the same word used chapter to chapter, but in a little bit different context. But it's just another indication of what we're seeing between Ruth and Boaz is indicative of the relationship of God's people to God. All right, and we're going to see it here in a big way in just a second. So let's keep reading here. Verse 10, it says, "And he said, 'May you be blessed by the Lord, my daughter. You have made this last kindness greater than the first, in that you have not gone after young men, whether poor or rich.'" All right, so what's Boaz saying to Ruth here? Thank you. Right? Because what Ruth could have done, out in the field, she's out around a lot of young men. All right, there would have been rich, poor, all kinds of young men around there. And he's saying that the kindness, I don't know how this actually is true, but this is what he says: the kindness that you've shown me in choosing me is even greater than the first kindness that you showed of your loyalty to your mother-in-law. I mean, you think about that, and we usually make this story about Ruth and Naomi and the kindness that she showed. But think about Boaz's situation. It at least seems he's a little bit older than Ruth, or maybe even a lot older than Ruth, that he may have been thinking, we're reading into the text here, that there was no chance he was ever going to be married. There was no chance he was ever going to have the same thing that Elimelech would have wanted, is the chance for his name to be carried on to the next generation and the next generation and the next generation. Because if Elimelech would have died unmarried, no kids, where would his line have gone? It would have stopped. And so she's providing for him, in his mind, more than he's ever provided for her. That's kind of, I never really grasped that all that much. That, like, I picture Boaz as kind of the hero, like providing and providing and providing, but he's so incredibly grateful for the relationship that he says, "This is better than the food I gave you. It's better than the loyalty you gave to Naomi. This is the real thing. You've blessed me more than you've blessed than I've blessed you at all." And he says, "And now, my daughter, do not fear. I will do for you all that you ask. For my fellow townsmen know that you are a worthy woman." Now, why is that important, that she's a worthy woman? Where's she from? She's from Moab. And so her nationality was not going to make this right. Right? Where she was from was not going to make this right. But her character spoke out above everything else.
You know, I wanted to go back.
Yeah.
Chapter 2 and make a comment that we know, I mean, we can take from the story from chapter 1 all the way that Ruth and Amalek was believed they were faithful.
Mm-hmm. Naomi,
And
yeah.
so they had 2 sons. So it just talks to me that his sons were also faithful. And that relationship with Ruth and Orpah, they would have had that kind of relationship.
Mm-hmm.
So that, to me, makes it easy for me to see Ruth staying with her.
Yeah.
Because she had become loyal to the faith too.
Yeah.
And so, then why did all this take place? It's because of Naomi's faithfulness and to keep the line written going.
Oh, yeah.
So, I think it's important, it's interesting that Ruth probably, she was so loyal and did all she did for Naomi because of her belief in her faith and her understanding of what right was.
Yeah. You're right. This is one of those stories. It's an odd story that everybody's a hero. Like, you don't see a villain in the book of Ruth. All right. Everybody had, like, without Naomi's faithfulness and who she was, this doesn't happen. Without Elimelech, this doesn't happen. Without Ruth, this doesn't happen. Without Boaz, this doesn't happen. There's no bad guy in this story. They're all excuse me. They're all heroes in their own aspects, and it's that faithfulness, right, that just continues. It's the faithfulness of Naomi and Elimelech that probably caused them to be parents who are raising faithful sons, who then married these women. They were Moabite women, but there's something different about their character than historically we know about the Moabite women who would have been seducing the Israelite men and that kind of thing. But these women were different. And it might have been they were already different, but it might not have been. It might have been that their faithfulness bred faithfulness that bred faithfulness. And then Boaz would have been from that same family, right? That those people in Bethlehem, that Elimelech's clan, that faithfulness. But this would have been really odd in the time of the judges. This family stood apart. It's like everyone, I wish at the end of Judges there was this little asterisk that everyone was doing what was right in their own eyes except for Elimelech and his family. They were following faithfully still, apparently. And thank you for bringing that out. He says, he gives some bad news, though, to Ruth. He says, you know what, I'm going to provide everything that you ask. And Ruth takes this big risk on love, and Boaz responds with great thanksgiving, but then there's only one problem. And what's that problem?
Another family member that's more reason in line.
Yeah. He says, I am a redeemer, but it's not my turn. I'm not the closest redeemer. There's someone in your family who is closer in line to you that has the right to redeem you first. Can you imagine Ruth taking that risk? Like going at night and laying at the feet and presenting herself and have it and then all of a sudden he's like, yes, I will. Thank you so much for your generosity. I will do whatever, I'll do exactly what you're asking. And this emotion's up, but there's somebody else that could. Oh, man. There's somebody else that could. So I wonder what's going to happen. All right. He says, but remain tonight, and in the morning, if he will redeem you, good, let him do it. But if he is not willing to redeem you, then as the Lord lives, I will redeem you. Lie down until the morning. And then in verse 14 and following, just at the end of the chapter, it says, so she lay at his feet until the morning, but arose before one could recognize another. And he said, let it not be known that the woman came to the threshing floor. And he said, bring you the garment you are wearing and hold it out. So he held it out, and he measured out 6 measures of barley and put it on her. And then she went into the city. And when she came to her mother-in-law, she said, how did you fare, my daughter? And then she told her all that the man had done for her, saying, these 6 measures of barley he gave to me, for he said to me, you must not go back empty-handed to your mother-in-law. And she replied, wait, my daughter, until you learn how the matter turns out. For the man will not rest, but will settle the matter today. All right, big deal. Boaz will not rest until he settles the matter of redemption. All right, I've only got one question to ask on this, and it's a pretty obvious question, but here it is. Ruth needed redemption. Boaz desired a relationship, and they both got exactly what they were looking for. How does this mirror the dual pursuit between us and God? I mean, doesn't it paint it perfectly? Here's a question. Does God need you? He doesn't. There's nothing about me that God says, hey, without you, I can't do this. or I need you for this. And so his only, I would say, I want to generalize everything like this, but I would say his main chasing after you and relationship is desire. That's it. Not need, but desire. He wants a relationship with his people. He wants a relationship with everyone that he's created. All right, every person he wants a relationship with. What do you need in the situation? Someone to save you, right? Because like Ruth, what do you got? I've got nothing, right? I can eat. I'm not talking about physically, but when it comes to spiritual things, without a redeemer, I'm lost. And so Ruth, this story of Ruth is just painting this beautiful picture of the same exact thing that the Israelites, that the Hebrew people were facing as well, is that without him, and they've chosen to be without him at this point, They have no hope at redemption. But what has God continued to do over and over and over again? Offer hope or extend the hand of relationship, right? Like, hey, you need redemption desperately. I don't necessarily need you, but I chose you. And I'm going to give you chance after chance after chance after chance to choose me too, because I have everything that you need that you could never provide for yourself. Do you think Ruth was ever going to be able to work hard enough to buy back her own redemption? I don't know. Maybe not without the help of Boaz. But if she was just like any other gleaner in the field, probably no hope of buying back her redemption. Not in that way. Her only hope was him. But then he responds in a really awesome way when he says, you know what? You are exactly what I'm looking for too. Because without you, there's implications there, right? Now, I know God can do anything that he wants. He's God. He's sovereign, right? But here's a question. I may have gave a wrong answer before. But without you, could that change anything about God? If he doesn't have you.
He has such great love for us. It's more than just a desire or whatever. It's a great love. He gave his whole life.
Mm-hmm.
So he really lost something with us because that's what he came for.
He already gave up something great.
God himself gave up something. The Father was sent him here too, so he has feelings too.
Yeah.
That's what I feel.
Yeah. Is there a heritage? Is there a godly heritage? I'm like Boaz, like his line would have stopped if he would have died. He didn't have children to carry that on. What do we see in Judges? The very first part of Judges. When Joshua died, what happened?
Next generation.
The heritage stopped, right? Why? Because there came about a whole generation that neither knew God or what he had done for them. All right, so I know it's kind of an odd question that I asked before, but if God chose you, but you don't choose him, right? If this doesn't work out that way, if you don't go for the redemption, but he still desires you, it's possible, we've seen in the book of Judges, that if a group of people don't choose God, it's possible that that heritage and that line can possibly stop. All right? You think about it, if every parent that is here in this church decides, you know what, we're just not going to teach our kids about the Lord. What are the chances? Now, it can happen. Can happen. But it's less likely to happen that those kids are going to then turn around and choose the Lord and keep on going. It can happen, and it has happened, and it does happen, right? But if everyone collectively said, you know what, when we're together now as the church family, we're going to choose everything except God. We're going to talk about everything but God. We're going to ignore the things that God has done, and we're not going to teach our kids this. We're not going to, nothing at all. No, we'll never do that, all right? But if it did, it's possible that we can take that next generation and say, you know what, you don't know the Lord or anything he's done for you. And then what happens? Vernon?
You know, you mentioned a moment ago that God doesn't need you. And I think one of the classic examples illustrating that truth would be Mordecai and Esther. When the Jews were being threatened with annihilation under Persia, Mordecai told Esther, says, do not think in your heart that you will escape in the king's palace any more than all the other Jews. For if you remain completely silent at this time, relief and deliverance will arise for the Jews from another place. So he was pleading for her to use her influence with the king to
somebody.
God will bring somebody else in.
Yeah,
But God's will be accomplished.
that's right.
And it could be you, or maybe somebody else.
Yeah.
I think it illustrates what you're saying. God doesn't need me for a job. If he wants it done, if I don't do it, he'll find somebody else to do it.
Yeah, but he does tell her, yeah, that's that for such a time as this. You've been put here for this. And so that's the thing. You choose. The job's going to get done. That's right.
If you don't take it, you'll be annihilated with all the others.
That's right. Or you could just make the right choice. You could stand up and you could bring about peace for your people. Listen, we're already about a couple minutes over time, but we're going to finish up Ruth next week. Summer series is coming up quick, and we're going to be in the Sermon on the Mount for the summer series. But I want us to just continue to think about Ruth for a couple more weeks, and the implication that, like, next week we're going to see the pinnacle of everything. The risk of love happened tonight within Ruth. She put herself out there. Boaz reciprocated, but there could be a little hitch in the wheel right here. There could be a issue going on because there's another redeemer. But what we're going to see is how things get worked out, and then how one relationship or one choice can affect generation after generation after generation. All right, love you guys. Glad you're here tonight, and hope to see you on Sunday. Actually, there is something going on Friday, and I don't know, it was put out there, but Amy Shepard's grandmother is not doing well, and I don't have all the details, but we can get them put out. She is trying to gather a group of people to go stand outside of her grandma's house. I think it's Friday, and just sing and pray and bless her in a great way. Kind of like we used to do during COVID time, but nobody can go in the house, but as many people as can get out there and sing and just bless her in that way. That would be, I know Amy would love that, but also her grandmother would love that in a great way also. Sorry.